for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumined, beloved divine.
So hello there everyone, and a very warm welcome. So today we are here and we have a new month of May. It's a new kind of energy coming in through, and it's very powerful. And especially because some of you or all of you probably know that this month we have a change in nodal axis of the moon. So we're moving into the north nodal alignment of Gemini and south being Sagittarius, which is in concurrence my own natal chart alignment as well, and when it comes to nodes. And I think this will particularly relate, although as you know I'm not an astrologer, but what I feel intuitively, this will very much relate with the way communication is coming through and what is still new to us. What are some of the aspects that we think we know about this life, what's happening and we don't? And what are some of the past things we believe are truth and yet are not anymore? Because especially those of you who are following this path along with me or myself in this cosmic Christ journey, you are coming into awareness that there were so many things that when you were at a certain point, a location, right, where you found yourself to be at that time, and that's what you thought life or reality to be. And later, when you grew and developed and you expanded further, you realize it was not. It's like that infinite divine creation structure, right? We have one divine, ultimate, pure creator force of life, of love. And then we have these beings, creator beings like Elohim. And we have further, segments of creation moving down into the descent of life. And as we're actually each experiencing ourselves as a droplet coming through and then having our personal experience, we're seeing more and more how this life is not just to move into like higher octaves of being, but to bring that beingness of the higher nature, which is still also expanding and exploring life, just at a different venue, right? A different way. But it's still to bring that element of life through our own experience, harmonizing it with this particular density and this way of life. So as you know, for a very long time, this reality, this density had many wars that were all being played to, it's kind of like who will rule over this planet and who's going to be the main controlling system. And we still see sometimes these hands, right, shown in many pictures that exist online, like these dark overlords holding pictures almost like playing chess, right? And I don't see it like what most people say, it's only the dark forces. As you know, they have such a huge influence on this life. There's always been both sides. So chess is an interesting game, right? It has both white checkers and black ones, these boxes, right, that we're putting our figures in. So it's like, I've explained this journey of illumined union for a very long time now as a light makes a move and then the dark makes a move, and it's kind of like this concurrent journey. And because we only in our human experience right now see the immediate, we can't always see the bigger picture. And that's why we were talking about expanding our visions and holding a bigger vision for life at this time and unifying the timelines. Because as you know, there's several people now as humans, right, in these human bodies that exist at totally different levels. Not just wavelengths, right, of what you resonate with, but what you embody. And we've all been particularly resonating with certain spheres of what is important or essential for us. This has been, interchangeable between, it's interchangeable, if you look at every single human, we're all unique. And in this uniqueness, there is our unity, right? That's what unifies us. And that's, basically the gift of life, the gift of grace of divine love is to bring and implement more of life into these structures that exist now instead of going somewhere else. because that's not really acknowledging that life is already taking place here. This is a part of life. This is a part of density that we're experiencing at this time. And this is where we're bringing in that light, this newness. So the gift of this novelty of life we've been talking about for a while now, is like life always reinventing itself. So it's not like we're bringing through, even those of you who resonate a lot with particular star frequencies and calling yourself starseeds and such, it's not just about bringing a particular frequency and anchoring it on the planet, such as, I'm bringing through Sirius energy or Pleiadian or Arcturian, like different aspects of life. But it's more about what these energies in conjunction with our earth plane and this density are creating or co-creating together. So if you look at cells, right, and cellular organisms, cells don't just exist as one unit. They exist within a morphogenetic field, and they all communicate together. They're actually a great body of intelligence. But as we're living this life, we're all experiencing impacts from the environment and the stress and the manipulation of this reality, and implants and dark controller forces and dark experiments and all of that, right? Our cells also become interdependent upon other frequencies that are less than just opening and inviting and bringing in more love, which basically leads to opening up to more life. So because of that, right, the narrative for so long in this human realm has been a lot of distortion and confusion. And I've been sharing with you how the ability of humans so far hasn't been in the existence of generating life. They weren't able to co-create life. They were able to experience themselves. And we've had, as different individuals, these soul experiences, like soul came in as droplets, right? Individual droplets, also a part of the larger, greater field. But they were so far having these beautiful experiences in the body, through the body, but not yet co-creating with the bodies, right? Or co-creating the bodies themselves. Because so much has been enforced upon, so that humans couldn't develop these greater divine abilities that are natural, right? So if you look at one body, let's say you're looking at the body of Elohim, family of light. For me, it's a family of light. It's not just one versus the other. It's like a conjuncture, right? It's a conglomeration of beingness that has a particular aspect of creation that they're holding, and they're able to generate life at the level and in the way that we can understand now as humans. But what is becoming more available to us as humans is we're aligning more and more with the nature of what that means for us, and specializations that we're now uncovering as we're opening up to more light, therefore more frequency, new frequencies, and then how these frequencies, when they're being embedded within our own embodied structure, how they're co-creating within this realm, with this life itself. So instead of focusing that there's just light and then there's just darkness, which is still compartmentalized, right? It's still polarity. It's seeing that there's a multi-spectrum of field, and it's all life. So recently, right, through my own experience, I was drawn to a very major breakthrough, and I'm going to talk about this further and much more extensively on my page called Illumined Ascension on Patreon, because this is where I do the work actually. But I'm going to mention a few things here, as the journey was unraveling for me in the last few weeks was super intense, and I couldn't be or do much more because it was so intense. And I've had to endure a lot of physical pain, and I was able to see how pain literally de-souls you. Like it creates like a ripple, effect, and it isolates you in a way. And I was able to explore these realms and how to basically work with pain within a high understanding, not just physically, but neurologically, cellularly, right? Because basically our nervous system is like a tree of life that expands outwards. So our nervous system isn't just sending signals within and throughout the body, but is receiving within a much wider network of divine information, right? So when there's all these things like lower frequencies that keep us entrapped in a certain, density alone and not open to higher frequencies, and frequency modulations that are artificial, that belong to a network of artificial intelligence, and even what we now know as our internet is a part of, that sphere. Because it's all about where this advancement will lead, whether it will, we're now kind of like in between, right? Whether it's going to lead, it's like one fraction is opening to internet becoming more organic, and when, using these quantum fields and scalar waves and things like that. I'm going to be talking about that as well in the galactic updates on Patreon. But there's one branch, as you know, that's going towards artificial intelligence. So we're kind of right in between, and this is what we call the split of the worlds, right? This is where we are now. So because there's different beings that we now exist, some of us are deeply aware, some beings are still asleep, some beings are waking up, and some of us are advanced. We're already working with these higher frequencies and getting advanced information. So for myself, as I was in this turmoil and deep darkness again in initiation, at the same time I was receiving so much, because this is how the darkness initiates. You receive a lot of information and knowledge and unveiling when you're allowing yourself to go through it, when you're not like, oh, I'm not going to go there, this is too much, and you just want to wait it out. And you can never wait something out. It's always going to catch up with you. That's the thing. So I call these dark initiations something that you have to really penetrate. You have to go into the cave. You have to go into the womb. And you have to break through on the other side. You can't go like this and say, well, it's closed. I'm going to just turn around and go back. It doesn't exist, because that's not basically how life functions. Life is truly a spiral. And when you understand that, you will see that everything is a part of life. And this is what I recently came into a deeper embodiment of, and I'm going to talk about this as well on Patreon in our monthly transmission. But I'm going to say that, you know, you will see many people at different levels and different stages of our journey, and some people are only focused on creating their reality. Well, some people are not even aware that they have free will, that they can create a reality. But then there's people who start creating their reality, applying different methods. But we've already talked about in the previous videos how different densities call out for different approaches and different implementations of what manifestation truly is. It's all variables, because it's like shifting timelines, and with each shifting of the timeline, you absorb more, you generate more, and you're able to understand that manifestation is being held at a much wider level that you were able to perceive before, right? So this is what multidimensionality means, because we are moving towards galactic humanness, beingness, and multidimensional consciousness. And I've been talking about this for years, and so many people have. But it's one thing to talk about it, but it's a whole other thing to have this happen within you. And it's not all without symptoms and trials and tribulations and pains and things, because these actually lead to unlocking these gates. So just as you have people, right, we've talked about, that are focused only on their reality, we also have people who are coming together within wider networks and groups, holding consciousness and space for consciousness together, holding space for love, and doing these global meditations now, especially at this time. And we've noticed this, right, and the spiking of the Schumann resonance has been off the charts, right? And we've been seeing how our own status, right, where we are, will have a different influence when we expand and jump into a wider timeline. So timelines are not, when we think of timelines, we think like linear lines going out of one juncture point, but it's not like that. They kind of exist like mini spirals within these. So you might feel you're walking this trajectory, at a certain point you come across this spiral, and it's like it has the ability to suck you in, or you're gonna say no, you know, I'm gonna shift to that one. And this is what we do, you know. Humans are still learning to co-create dimensionally and multidimensionally. This is so new still. But there's those of us who are here as advanced light beings that are now going through this massive transfiguration change in our bodies. And a part of that is also learning the dark dynamics and the dark operatives, and the way darkness was holding us and holding these physical bodies entrapped. And this is what I call the goddess liberation and resurrection, because in truth, we still as humans don't even understand what the word goddess is. We usually, especially in religious tradition, apply to some deity of an immense influence that had a certain affinity of sainthood and something like that. But this is not what truly the goddess means. From the creation standpoint, the goddess is the aspect of life that is descending. It's descending the light of illumination into what we talked about before. And I always say this is my motto. This is why I came here too on this planet, is to bring the light of illumination into the worlds of creation. So the goddess is the aspect of life embodied. It's that which pulsates. It's that which wants to bring life to the living structures. And when I was first starting to channel my cosmic Christ material, I was being shown how there were beings, there was a fraction of beings called the original, there was the original White Brotherhood, and then there was a fraction of beings that separated themselves from this idea of bringing life to all diversities, to all densities. They wanted to hold their status quo. They wanted to be there. They wanted to stay in that higher, council control. They didn't want to work with the element of life, which made them very rigid. And I've talked to you about how one aspect or fraction of these beings became an influence and an influencer in my own reality. And I had an agreement with these beings, and I've talked to you about these in the last few segments, right? Because it is an important part, and some people might get afraid and they say, wow, we don't want to go there, or what she's talking about now, what she's talking about these dark beings, and she's supposed to be an illumined being talking about this and bringing forth this knowledge. Well, you don't understand that the greater aspect of life, if that's how you're thinking, right, it's all joined in, it's all together. So when we come and bring the aspect of life to these numerous systems that are already holding the provision for life, we're going to have to go through all of these. This is what, for me, the goddess liberation means, and we've talked about this before, right? It's so complex. And for one to be able to do this, and I was shown many times by other fellow light beings that there were many who've tried this before on this planet, specifically because it was so tempting to do so, because there was such an immense opportunity to grow as a light being through these experiments. Like taking on this journey, taking on this physical vessel, and then penetrating it with this higher consciousness, and sometimes seeing, oh, it's not working, right? Why is it not working? Why can the light move through in this way? And this is when I recently had this major realization. And this is what led me to what I'm also going to be talking about on Patreon this month, is they've told me before that my own purpose, the name, it's given in the name, and my soul being, my consciousness name is Aurea. And I didn't know up until a certain point, because they were giving me signs and clues and what it means at different levels. But the deepest meaning of this name, they told me, is it means the essence of life. And they were calling me, because I said, where do they originate from? What's my soul name? What's the group? And they said, those who give life, the life givers. And we can really easily mistake in that, right? We think of giving. Okay, I need to give, I need to give, I need to bring the aspect of life. But this is kind of misleading in itself, in a title, right? In a position, because you think that life is only to be given, shared, right? But in truth, there's always a divine trinity, remember. The trinity means the giver of life, the receiver, the recipient of life, and life in essence itself. So this is what they recently told me when I had this major breakthrough. Because what I realized is there were aspects of me, myself, as you know, when these beings were also part of my reality, they placed within me through their infiltrations, that they were hijacking certain channels, right? Because we have these channels of these higher communications, like telecommunications. These are like multidimensional telecommunications are coming through. So these channels were modulated and modified in a way so that I could learn one day how to unlock and unhijack them and see what it was all about. Because the light, if it wants to penetrate the darkness, it needs to illuminate it. And that means you have to understand it, what it is, where it is. You have to understand every single transfiguration that's basically that's not in alignment with the immaculate design of life and impeccable nature of who we are. So that's quite a journey. It's a very intense path, I'll tell you that. And so these beings placed this element of control within me. So they didn't just do these experiments with these electrical charges on me, modifying my body in an outside manner, which is invasive. And it was always, as I've told you, like against my will from the outside, like catching you off guard. But at the same time, they placed certain belief systems of control that would make me become more isolated and thinking I always need to do everything myself, and there's a certain linear way of doing this. When in fact, when I had to break through the most recent unveiling, I actually saw that the biggest issue of these controlling narratives is that the way light functions in that, right, rigid way is like it always needs to be, something needs to be achieved through that light and light alone. So let me put it in a simple term. An advanced light being would say, oh, we're going to move into this human form. We're going to change it. We're going to change it completely through our own experiments. We're going to do it with this light and that alone. And nothing else is of value, because all else that exists at lesser density is less important. So therefore, we're rendering it as not important. So many light beings actually that didn't develop through the love of life, they actually experience this as, in many aspects of life, as less than. That's why you still have many starseeds who are here on Earth, and they still have to learn. Don't think that starseeds are all illuminated, because they're not. And some of them are actually sent to the Earth to learn, so they can get their next diploma when they're when they're learning in their own schools of life, right? Going through these different mystical schools and training. So from that perspective, you have to know that you can't be rigid. When you're truly becoming an illumined being, you can't be rigid in any way. And that means you're going to have to understand the workings of cosmic Christ. You're going to have to understand your unity principles. You're going to have to understand universal law. And you're going to have to understand the compliance with the life that is offered and is being offered to be brought into novelty or an existence of something new through grace, through love. Not just these configurations that are placed like with intentional light seeding, right? So as you know, those of you who understand these things and ancient teachings and history origin and ETs and so on and so forth, there are many experiments as such. So a lot of these became very rigid because these light beings rendered physical life as less important. And we also know that from, it's even in the Bible, right, how the Nephilim came into being and how these beings who weren't even physical beings mated with the goddesses of earth, right? They wanted to inject these timelines and become a part of this lifeline here. And there's so many stories about this, but we're not going to go into that today because you can all do your own research here. But the fact was there were so many experiments, and what recently I began to uncover was how these implants, these were like energetic belief systems, right, were placed through these channels. And one of them specifically was, and that happened for me last year, all of a sudden, out of the blue. It was, I think, at the end of October towards November. And I was hit with severe pain out of nothing. And then I said, I can heal this, right? I can do it myself. And I was focusing on it, and it took about 2 weeks, and then I was better. But then on the other side, right here, I told you, like here, right, it began, and I never had such intense pain, right, in my jaw and the teeth, and it was like, wow, I can heal this myself. I was able to do it here. And it's a long story. I don't want to go into it today here on YouTube. I'm going to go deeper on Patreon. But this whole time when I was in this process, I was just experiencing pain, and I didn't want to take anything for the pain, no pain medication, no painkillers, anything. I said, I can do this naturally. But the problem is, and what I realize now, because what started happening in my own experience is this pain became very chronic. And it wasn't until my recent development when I fell into deep pain again, because it was happening in waves, right? It's like constantly, but on and off. So I just couldn't handle it anymore. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to take one pill. I don't have it at home because we don't use it. So my mom had to go ask a neighbor. And he gave them, and I felt such a loving presence all of a sudden. It didn't make sense. So I'm going to tell you something else, because simultaneously, for a few days now, these new beings started interacting with me, and they're kind of like my own personal medical team. They're amazing. They're definitely Arcturian beings, but as you know, there's not one group in particular. There's several. There's different echelons and specialization teams within one body of beings. So they started coming into my body. I'm going to share about them in the Galactic Update and what they do, and they want to be introduced in this way through me. But simultaneously, they started coming through and assisting me because of my nervous system collapse, and because it experienced these interjections, right? So my nervous system was hypersensitive, and it started reproducing the pain. So the pain, as I channeled one day myself, because I was so much in pain, I just went and prayed to the Divine Mother, and I said, please just give me anything. I just need to know what's happening. I'm gonna die again, And I easily saw this whole thing. And we've talked about these beings, right? How in their first cycle, they experimented with body and the forms, like sending these light beams as electrical charges. But they told me in the next cycle, because this created pain in the body, but in the next cycle, these beings then wanted to understand pain, why and how it originates in the human body. So because of that being planted in that seed, and I was basically, when I was going deeper into the layers of the onion, right, breaking through all of this densities and these implants, I was seeing basically how they were able then to inject pain, like through the cellular memory, in order to explore it. And when the pain, because when I got that pill, what happened, I went online first to read about those pills, and was reading through, and apparently there was a statement from a doctor saying, the pain, if you don't stop it and say no to it, it's going to become worse, and eventually it's going to become chronic, which in itself will be like a disease needing to be treated. And it's interesting because that's exactly the clue that I needed towards the last stage of this whole story coming together. It was like, wow, I never even thought of that, because as a light being, you always think in terms of everything being like perfect and the light will resolve it all and we're just coming to natural, because if you're of the light, everything will be always of the light. And when you have different experiences, and as you know, it's even well known that many mystics and saints also suffer through, various illnesses. And so because there's this vertical alignment that often it kind of like depletes us, or it disconnects us from engaging with life at the level of where this density is held. So basically, illumination of our body, which is what I'm teaching on Patreon, is becoming an illumined new human, is consistent of these light informative channels and us receiving them, but simultaneously also the receptacle nature, which is our body, being at a specific density. And we need to understand the laws and principles that this body holds at this particular density. We can't like bypass it. We can't like transcend it by saying, oh, it's all of the light, I'm going to do it and cure it myself if I just focus and meditate and all of this. This was done. This was tried. That's why so many failed. And this is what I was shown. That's why so many beings failed, because they were only focused on the narrative of light. And so recently, in one of my other prayers to the Divine Mother of Life, I was saying, please show me the way, what I can do now. And the sentence came through, I always love the light, but not always myself. And it literally means the physical body, what it needs, the body becoming so intelligent that it can signal to you exactly what it needs and how in each moment. So when I suffered in silence back in winter, like for months in pain, I literally filled my body with more pain because I didn't give the body what it needed at the time. Maybe just one signaling of no would be enough at that time. And the body would start, it would start to ease in the nervous system well enough to start doing the repair work. But because I didn't, that's what happened. And it led to more and more chronic pain. And I understood that as, oh my gosh, how much do I need to get that? And they were actually showing me that this is when a breakthrough is made. And this is what so many failed to do before. In understanding the unity principle of life, everything is life. It's physical, right? It's physics, it's chemistry, so it's chemical, it's biological, it's electromagnetic, it's pure essence. All of these levels coexist. So when you're human, the gift you have is you know yourself in all densities. So if you have higher functionalities, right, higher essences, they know themselves in different levels. But when you're a human, you know all of these aspects plus the human, the body. This is why understanding physical life and its shifting nature and how it can change and how it can metamorphosize itself has been so challenging, right? Because once you become human, right, you're already in a way become polarized, and it's very difficult to unify this higher aspects and the body opening up like a lotus. And there needs to be this merger. So I'll address this much deeper on Patreon, because we're going to do this in the transmission together. What's the point? But the point is the body becoming illumined, and it's equal to what we call our light being, our light body. And it's happening in different ways. Like I said, there's beings who are stepping down their frequency, becoming more human, and there's humans growing more towards their light beingness. And this is where the interjection is happening now, this merge. And as we have many light beings on earth now that are downstepping their frequencies, we have many earth beings now who are really raising up and starting to ascend. And this is what will basically create this unity. And this is what union means to me at the highest level, understanding life. And this is why these beings failed, because they didn't want to bring the essence of life to all densities. They wanted to stay where they are, be rigid in there, and just keep control and influence other realms and other densities from their position, which is what led to many beings that we now even know as different fragments and splinter-offs. We know many beings like archons, right? These very powerful mind beings, very controlling beings that feed off of different discharges of energy that humans emanate, right? And they almost became like part artificial intelligence because of that, because this is what happens. And when you become that, you become like a virus, because you start injecting other live streams with this consciousness. And this is what's happening on our planet at this time. As you can see, it's like splitting, half organic, half AI. And there's even many in the spiritual circles now, you know, the new age gurus who are starting to advertise the artificial intelligence, which is bogus. But that's what they're doing, and that's where they are. So you have to be very observant, very careful to know what is what, and to know the true guidance of the Christ. Because, you know, there's many teachers of spirituality, but they never will even once mention the word Christ and what it means. So you have to think about that. You have to be very careful if you're following this path, if this is what you ultimately wish to illuminate yourself with and become yourself a multidimensional being, a galactic human. It's not going to come by you listening only to people who channel galactics. You know, it's like comes as a channeling, can come and go as easily, right? As it comes, it can go. It's not going to come just from that. But it's really going to come from doing this work. And that's why, like I promised, this month we're going to start the first program on Patreon, the first advanced transmission for the light body intelligence, and working, you know, becoming infused with that and starting our human work within that narrative. So yeah, it's been really a vital transition for me, just really embracing what life means. So a while ago they told me that Aurea is the goddess of life, and in each particular creation cycle there was a goddess, the feminine aspect, the feminine Christ, that was working towards the embodiment of that essence that they were supposed to bring through. We have many figures like Kuan Yin being compassion, Mother Mary being grace, Magdalene being that, you know, fierce power of love. We have, let's say, way back, we had Queen Sheba, who was an epitome of power. She was amazing. And at each cycle, something was needing to be brought forth. So they told me, in this cycle, you as Aurea, as the goddess essence of what you came to descend and embody through your own beingness, is the essence of life. And it didn't always make sense to me, so I'm going to be, again, sharing more about this on Patreon. But at the end, when all of these puzzle pieces were starting to come together, it made total sense that both the light beingness and the human density as it is right now, and what it needs in each moment, the body can signal to the light intelligence, and then also trusting that the light intelligence will penetrate through whatever. So when these beings started working with me, these Arcturian beings, they're amazing. They're just, I can't wait to make an update about them, because they're simply amazing. I just love them. They're with me every day now. And they told me exactly on the day when I was having major issues, they said, yeah, the nervous system is starting to collapse a bit because it was just overcharged, you know? And that's what these anomalies are starting to happen throughout the body, and these weird sensations, you know, especially in my head area. And they said it's complex, but it's not yet as critical, so we're going to help. So they're actually now helping me to, because I've done the enough clearing of the channels work, otherwise they couldn't even come through, you know. We don't understand as earth beings how much work we need to do in the body to actually start receiving these impulses, because we can be aware that they exist and say, well, our star brothers and sisters, but anchoring this consciousness is something totally else, because you have to do a whole lot of work, and I'll tell you that. Through my own experience, it's been hell, but it's also been beautiful, because it's been amazing. So by clearing these channels, I was now able to receive them, and they fuse with you like a liquid light plasma, and it's very interesting. And they work from within the body and consciously. They're always going to tell you what they're doing. It's not invasive. It's not like they will catch you off guard. It's all with your consent. It's all within the golden light of Christ and divine creator, because they are a part of that light and that universal principle of life. And it's like they were telling me they're going to help me again to attune my galactic channels within my own resonance, that which I naturally resonate with as a being. So that's going to be intense. I'm really excited. So I'll share about them and a little more on Patreon in the Galactic Update. But yeah, it's been intense. And they were telling me, they said it's not, as an earth humans, we have to know nothing is black and white and nothing is set in stone. So in one example, we would say, well, painkillers are bad, right? Because they're part of medical system and medicine corporations, and it's all bad and all stinks. But they told me it's not as that, because what might be terrible in the cases when you start abusing that and you become dependent on that, versus when you actually need that as a call just to bring the signal to the body and ease in the nervous system. So they told me in my example, if I take it just once, they said it's going to give an impulse, it's going to help to ease in the system and tell the body, nervous system to calm down. And it was amazing because they themselves understand that. They understand the beauty of where life is held at this level. So if that's not embraced, how do we expect life to move into the next octave of beingness? It cannot. Because you're denying what is here right now in the first place. And we're denying that the bodies can get sick and have these things, and we're saying, well, the light will fix it all, I've just watched this Christian movie called, what's it called? I can't remember now. For some reason I can't. Maybe later. But it was about this woman, she was engaged to this musician. They just got engaged, and then she actually got sick. She had this cancer in her belly, and she was told she's going to die. And in one of the concerts, right, everyone prayed and put their hands on her, and she said she's cured. All of a sudden, doctor tells her, you're cured. And she was able to get married, and they went on a honeymoon, and then she got sick again, and very severely, and it was back. But at the end, I remember she was saying, if my life can influence even one person, then I know I've done my job. And at the end, she was free of pain, and she left her body. And that her partner actually met someone else right afterwards. And she was actually the one who was assisted by her story and her sharing, because she was like experiencing a downfall. And when she encountered that, it's like a miraculous healing for her. And you can see that believing in God and having the faith and all of that is not always enough. But for me, that prayer to the divine, which is I also do whenever I'm in my deepest, darkest moments, all I can do is pray. But for me, prayer means I'm connecting to that golden light to just bring me exactly the awareness, the epiphany that I need in that moment to make the shift, to make the transition, because I'm actually doing the work. No energy can ever penetrate you and do something for you, but it works with you. And this is when we need to understand what God as the creator means. It's not just some force outside of you, but us learning to use it within our body, but also not just recognizing ourselves as the sovereignty of source, our own creatorship, but that everything around us is a part of the sameness. Everything that your body will be taking in, we take food every day. So we're not just an internal light being. We take things from our environments. Even light beings assist themselves with other means. They're just not as physical and tangible that we hold right now. But this is what I believe is the greatest epiphany that is a part of what Illumined Union is. So if you're willing to go deeper into the journey with me, you can always join me on Patreon. It's kind of cold, so I have to go now, get dressed, because my jacket's over there. And remember how this also aligns with our current global situation. There's a lot of things we don't see. There's a lot of things we don't know. There's a lot of things, even though we don't see, we do know from deeply within. And there's a lot of things we just need to let go of, how they're supposed to be happening. Even with these things, will the darkness prevail? Will the dark agendas prevail? Will the light prevail? It's like we really have to trust. We have to trust in the divine plan while doing our own part. And for me, that part is doing the work I'm doing with my own embodiment and what my light being came here to anchor. I cannot participate in this reality in any other way, because that way is already that which is necessary and beneficial for the whole. So remember that, and don't go too much into the expectation of what will happen or what's supposed to happen. Just allow the narrative of life force, of spirit, to take care of these things when you pray and you focus on yourself, attuning to through Christ consciousness, that highest aspect of what you can bring through and embody and anchor at this time. Okay, so I hope you will have a beautiful month, and as always, you're invited to join our sacred group space and anchor together with us what's coming through. And if not, I'll see you next time, as always, with so much love, wisdom, and power. Bye for now. Bye.
Magical.